Welcome back. In this section, we'll be talking about more HTML elements and how to structure things in a proper way. First things first, as always, here's a basic example of the code. Hopefully by now you have a better understanding about how things work out because we're going to be modifying it a little later. Let's talk about some heading elements. If you've ever seen a newspaper in the past 30 plus years, you notice that a big, bold header is catching your attention. Well, the reason why this is because it is outlining the content of the paper and letting you know what to read first. Everything else below that is just pre-sectioned out to see exactly how things can be laid out as far as content. When we're using heading elements for web coding, it is also used for search engine optimization so that the search engines can portion out the information. It allows for the ease of usability or readability for the user, and the heading elements are automatically bolded and pre-sized, but they can be modified. So let's take a look at a few items in this paper by itself. First off, we have the newspaper to move focus to digital. Big, bold header right on the top to catch your attention. Next, we have the in fall paper will cut weekly print additions to 3. That's just talking about a subsection of the primary heading. Then you have a subheading down here and another subheading as well. That breaks up the information in the page so that you know what to read and what order to read it in. When you're talking about heading elements, keep in mind it's not the head element of HTML, but instead a heading element. The heading elements are used again to separate and organize the content. If you notice on the left, the H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6 tags all look the exact same in the code, but once they're processed in the browser on the right, you see that they're automatically pre-sized and pre-styled based on how and what tag is being used. The P tag by itself stays the standard size only because that is the browser-defined styling for that. Now there are only 6 heading elements, and they're pretty easy, H1 through H6. That's it. Why would you ever use anything below H4 or heading 4? Well, there are some instances where you can use that as far as a 6 subsection area. Most cases you won't. You'll probably use 1, 2, and 3 most of the time, but the option is there in case you need to use 4, 5, and 6. Again, you can stylize these at a later point. So if we take a look at this paper again, if you notice, the very first one is of course your H1, the second one below that is your H2, and then at the bottom you have an H3 and another H3. Again, why would you ever use H4? Well, again, the option is there if you need it. Let's talk about proper pairing. Whenever you're opening a tag that is not a void tag, you want to make sure you use the same opening and the closing tag. We talked before about what order they should be, and now let's talk about exactly what the tags should be. For example, if you are to use an H1 tag, then close it with the H1 tag. If you're using H1 tag, don't use the H2 tag because then the browser doesn't know where the H1 tag ends. And chances are, if you put that through the validator, you'll get a validation error. Let's take a look at this example really quick. This basketball fun, you see strong tags, P tags, H1 tags, U tags, EM tags, etc. And the example on the bottom shows you exactly what those tags will do to the various items in the content. Well, if we say, for example, we forget one tag, such as the strong tag, let's just modify it to a B tag because B is also stand for bold. Well, if you open with the strong tag but close the B tag, well, the browser doesn't know where the strong tag ends. So in this case, it's just going to run through it and bold everything because it doesn't know where to go. This is a very simple example, but something that's very common if you use the improper pairing. Let's talk about block versus inline. All elements in HTML are automatically stylized as a block or inline. What this means is that an element that is a block style will automatically take up all the available horizontal space, such as headings, horizontal rules, and paragraphs. Inline elements are items that can be in line, hence its name, and it's only as wide as necessary, allowing for other elements to be aligned next to it, such as bold, italics, and line breaks. These can be modified with CSS. We'll discuss more about that in chapter 12 and beyond. But right now, if you have two headings side by side, such as H1 and H2, those will be on different lines, whereas a bold or an italicized item will be side by side because they are in line. With white space, Browsers don't render space in code aside from what's necessary, such as a single space. So all three of these examples, the hello world with a single space, the hello world at the bottom with a lot of spaces, and the hello world on the far right with the multiple new lines, they all generate the exact same thing in the browser, because the browser does not process all that extra space. If you have one space between words, it'll process that. If you have 10 spaces between words, it counts that as unnecessary and shrinks it down to 1. So in this case, you'll have at least one where a space is necessary. It's not going to automatically check for you where a space is necessary, but if a space is there, it'll respect it without being too unnecessary. We'll cover how to force this in Chapter 3. Paragraphs. Why would you ever use a p tag? Well, a p tag creates a paragraph around the text, and it's pre-stylized. If you noticed before with the hello world example that was written in a p tag, that had automatic margins set around it so that the paragraphs could be automatically spaced between other paragraphs and other content. If you didn't have the paragraph tag, it would just be line after line after line with no margins or spacing whatsoever. So the p tags allow for items like this to automatically have the margins installed. On the left, you don't see anything aside from the basic styling, but it is there. So if you take a look at the left and the right examples where you have paragraph tags, you notice that everything on here has a spacing between it, whereas if you just were to use line breaks, well, you have the different lines but no spacing around it. Next, let's take a look at the line break tag itself. If you notice, the code in the top example is just one big p tag. The code in the bottom is the exact same text. However, the code in the bottom is set based on the browser width. If the browser were to increase width, the text would increase width as well. There's no forcing breaking in this because it doesn't know exactly where to break. If you put in a line break, such as the BR tag, you notice that where the line break is, it automatically puts in a new line and forces it into the code. So that BR right there forces that line break right there. Because otherwise, well, the browser doesn't know what text needs to be broken up and what doesn't. So in this case, you can either add multiple p tags or line breaks inside of it. Just depends on exactly what you need to do and how to do it. However, if you are going to use line breaks, please make sure to use them appropriately. A few bad examples are to use a line break at the end of a p tag, or at the end of a previous tag where you want more space. Or if you are going to use line breaks, putting them in on the same lines as the code itself. What will be much better is if you're going to use them inside of any element, have the line break at the end of the line to begin the new line, or as soon as you have a new line, start it with a line break so that way it's easier to read, easier to debug, and you're not having to chase down spare tags. Comments. Comments are always good in code, and if you get to be a developer, you want to make sure that comments are your best friend. Comments are unprocessed code. They are ignored by the browser and usually not read by the user unless the user goes in and views comments. Documented code or commented code is good code because you can rely on notes that you leave, or others can rely on notes that you leave, or vice versa. And you can also provide feedback for guides. If you have to write a function or have to have a certain setup for something, you can leave a note or a comment on how this particular function or system is set up to be run. We'll get into that a little later. Comments in HTML start with the triangle bracket, exclamation point, and then a dash, and they end with a dash, dash, and triangle bracket. Anything between those items is ignored, including tags, and as long as the page is rendered as HTML, it will not show up. For example, on the left side, you can see the line, "Nobody can see me, he he he." On the right, it says, "Hello world, I like hiking," and the comment is nowhere to be seen. In this case, again, the comment is not seen by the end user. The browser ignores it, and pretty much anything between those two lines is not going to be processed by the browser. So you can leave pretty much anything you want in there. So, again, where is the comment? Well, we don't know, it's not in the code. Okay, that is the end of this section. The next section will be covering validation. So if you have any questions about anything we've discussed so far, please let me know and I'll get back to you as soon as I can.